Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us for the Global Rise of Medical Cannabis panel. My name is Lily Temperton, I'm an international cannabis analyst.
And I'm Georgia Glick, Head of Partnerships at Hanway Associates. We are an advisory firm and we offer research, regulatory affairs, and we focus on new market entry strategies for pharmaceutical and medical cannabis companies across Europe and Canada, alongside authoring reports through our publishing arm, First Wednesdays. While most panels today will focus on the largest medical market, Germany, in today's session, we will zoom out and take a macro view across the global medical cannabis sector to discuss some of the key trends, market dynamics, and considerations when operating in new regions. Outside of Germany, we see a number of interesting medical cannabis frameworks. Australia and the UK in particular have seen notable growth rates in the last few years. And with the limited pilot in France and unique frameworks in Italy and Portugal, there is a lot to discuss. Despite this, there are still regulatory blockers hindering these medical markets. And we also want to discuss some of those hindrances today.
It's a pleasure to be joined by such a diverse set of panelists today who are going to bring operational and expertise from a range of markets. I'd love to hand over to them to introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Lisa Haag. I'm founder and CEO of MJ Universe GmbH. We are a strategic advisory company, but we also operate our own projects, for example, Crowdinvest.de.
Hello everyone, willkommen, danke für Erscheinen. Mein Name ist Alex Revich. I've been coming here since 2017, helping Alex Rogers with ICBC, bringing lots of Canadians with me here. I've been in the industry since October 2013, so almost 10 years. A lot of fun, a lot of ups and downs, which we'll talk about. And now I work with Lush Brands. We're a contract manufacturer of edibles in Canada, and I have a pharmacy called Hybrid Farm, where we are the only pharmacy in North America that has medical cannabis on site. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gosia Menier, and I'm Chief Strategic Officer from Hapa Farm. We are a pharmaceutical company from Germany, having fully integrated operation in North Macedonia. I'm still living in Israel, but 2 weeks from now I will move to Germany. But I have almost 5 years experience in medical cannabis also from Israelis company, so I would like to share some experience related to regulation in Europe, which we gained last 4 years. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Fleeta. I am from Little Green Pharma. And Little Green Pharma is an Australian and a Danish producer of medical grade cannabis medicines. So we have operations in Australia and in Denmark. We're vertically integrated and we are exporting these medicines across the globe to patients, and we have a really big focus on the European market. It's such a special market, and really looking forward to joining this great panel today. So thank you for being here and listening to us.
Fantastic. So I'd like to kick off today by talking a little bit about patient access and medical frameworks. Gosia and Fleeta, you both have experience operating in a number of key emerging markets, such as Australia, Portugal, and Poland. I'm keen to hear from both of you, maybe to kick off, how has the over or the under-regulation led to supply shortages for patients or a lack of diversity in product formats?
I think, so let's go back a step if I can, and I think it's really important to recognise that each country has its own unique regulation or regime. And I think it comes back to each business, and I'm just going to speak at a business front to begin with, is what is the business model to begin with, because which markets do you want to play in? Because it's not like you can send to Germany and you can send to all the countries in Europe. The EU are just not aligned like that. And that was a big learning curve coming from Australia when we exported through a mutual recognition agreement initially into Europe, we have to understand the unique jurisdictions legislation. And because of that, the patient access system is really different in each of these markets. In Australia, it's a huge demand at the moment there, and our patients access it through a special access program through GPs and specialists who can prescribe, whereby there are other countries in the UK very restricted in terms of patient access at the moment. It's growing, it has potential, but right now it's only specialists that they're actually prescribing there. And then, look, France is a very different kettle of fish altogether. That's just a pilot program. Several companies are, including Little Green Pharma, are a part of that trial. And again, it's a very closed system, but we hope that that will catalyse in the next coming years to a legal market there. And I guess coming back to your question just about the product registration side of things, every country is different. Yes, it might have to be approved by the local authorities, but if you look at Poland, for example, you have to go through a product registration process or a marketing authorisation process, and the same for Portugal. And that can take 2 to 3 years to actually happen. And of course, when it's over-regulated, it is very hard for patients to access because there are limited products available, but often that's how an industry actually begins.
Yes, I will also add, thank you, because we have very, very similar experience. But I would like to add mainly that when the countries out of Europe, like Israel or Australia or Canada, for example, want to enter European market, first, it's not only business strategy, but it's mainly regulatory strategy. So you are really cracking regulatory path country by country, how you can register your product. First of all, what is the frames, regulatory frames? Because some countries, as Filita, you said, are very similar approach. Like magister formulation, we know that it's in Germany, in Switzerland, in Italy, in Poland, and some other European countries. But for example, Poland, my origin country, is very specific because you have to submit full marketing authorization dossier of pharmaceutical raw material. It means if you are registering like propylene glycol or I don't know, any other solvent, it's the same heavy quality dossier like medical cannabis. So we can say that the patient will wait for Little Green Pharma product, for example, in Poland, up to 2 years for flowers and maybe up to 4 or 5 years for extracts. So how is going on now in Poland? On the market, you have maybe in real life in the pharmacy, I don't know, 4 or 5 type of different flowers, and only 1 or 2 extracts, which is crazy if you compare it with German markets, which is oversaturated. I don't know, more than 100 different flowers and maybe 80 or 90 different extracts. So the doctors in Germany, they don't know how to even prescribe. So it's like embarras de choix from French, we can say, for the patients and doctors. And then what is going on back to Poland also, that even the registered products which are prescribed by the doctors are high THC, and only 1 flower is balanced CBD THC 8.8. So if patients are searching for CBD flowers, for example, CBD products, they will go to the hemp shops. I don't have any problem with the hemp shops, but the regulation for these CBD food supplement products are not so strict, not controlled. So sometimes the labels, we don't know what is inside. So I think that regulation, yes, but maybe not over-regulation. And for sure, we should control quality of the products, because we know very well it's not only the label regarding the API content, but also the heavy metals, so all the toxins, which can be very toxic for the patient. So yes, I think that in Europe we are struggling with this lack of harmonization from European Union, because we know that from pharmaceutical industry, there's always the harmonized path to access the European market. But in case of cannabis, it's really national path. And so many countries still are waiting to have the regulation. And we are all waiting how the European Pharmacopoeia or HMPC, for example, will classify medical cannabis. So I think the patient are like initiators of regulation. We see it in Spain. For example, it's still ongoing, and we'll see. We are looking forward what will be the next steps. But France also was initiated by the Association of Patients, and we still have this extension of 1 additional year of French pilot project, and hopefully next year we'll have the regulation in France to let the patient have a regular access and control access to the product.
Very similar way that we started in Canada, very challenging at the beginning. When we first started, we would ask people to go to their doctor to get their authorization, and they would say, my doctor doesn't authorize. They threatened to kick me out of their clinic if I use cannabis. So that was in 2013. So we had to create cannabis clinics, which are ways for patients to come in and get educated. Of course, licensed producers had to fund this, and we couldn't pay doctors because that's illegal, of course. But we had to find other ways to fund it because no one else was funding it. Otherwise, the patients would be paying, and we didn't want the patients to pay. So what happened was, now with legalization, the doctors are no longer scared that they're the gatekeeper. They were before forced to be the controller of cannabis, because if the doctor didn't authorize, no one was getting cannabis. Of course, that's not true, but that's how they felt, and they were worried about the college coming down on them. But now that recreational happened and people can just go buy cannabis across the street everywhere, anyone who goes to a doctor are actual real medical patients, and no longer are doctors afraid anymore. And you know, it takes a long time. Here we are 10 years later. So just a quick thought on that.
No, thank you. And I think that taps into something, Lisa, I know we were having a quick chat about just before we came in, which was how a lot of the market dialogue is about how flower still dominates, and there's various reasoning for that. I mean, doctors have conflicting preferences sometimes of preferring a more controlled dose extracted product, but what are the kind of dynamics that are at play here? It's not just potentially patient trends, but price and accessibility.
I think what we have to understand in Germany is that there are different groups of patients. There are patients that get their prescription via the doctor, and the doctor suggests it because he may think that's the best type of therapy. Unfortunately, that's still the least common variant, I would say. We have these patients who are voluntary or involuntary self-payers that are mostly in the flower section, where there's also a huge kind of availability of products. I mean, the good thing that we can say is that prices, meanwhile, are below illegal market prices, which I think is a very great achievement, but still we have a lot of bottlenecks that patients have to jump through in order to get a prescription, in order to get maybe reimbursement by the health insurance. But you can see that it's an ongoing discussion, and that the government is trying to make some improvements in that regard. Last week, for example, Ms. Kappert-Gonta, who was on the panel here before, she announced that there will be like a shortage of the time you have to wait till your application can be approved, and also there may be some doctors that get where the application does not need to happen, and so they can just prescribe, which would also be great. But it's baby steps, and we're really developing on a micro level, if you want to say so.
For sure. And in terms of that blur, as you say, between people liking it and finding it easier and actually better quality product often from the illicit market, do you think the entrance, and maybe Alex, you'll also have some insight here from Canada, of the entrance of categories like live rosin and hash and more kind of recreational style formats, carts, for example, can help with some of this and can help bring patients on that potentially are not into flower?
Absolutely, and I get this question all the time coming to Berlin. I mean, let's be honest, people in Europe love to smoke. Israel loves to smoke. There's certain places that they just love to smoke, but bless you. And the difference is these other forms are just much better medical products. And here I am so many years later having the same discussion. Once you allow these other formats in, they're a lot more consistent, they're a lot more clear. You know, again, I love flower as well, but when you're talking about medicine, there's just so many better ways. And, you know, we were making the joke backstage how in California, when I was there a few years ago, they talk about distillate as hot dog water. That is like the lowest form of input. And look, if you can't afford a higher input, it's fine. But for those that can and want to, hash rosin, live resin, these are way more pure, full spectrum, much better effect. You can try 5 milligrams of distillate versus 5 milligrams of hash rosin edible. It's completely different. And I know we're not talking about that yet in Europe. You're just starting to get your markets established, but this is where it's going, and you need to kind of prepare for that. And especially as a medical product, I'm sorry, smoking cannabis as a medicine, I know it seems like that's what you're fighting for, but you're going to be like 5 to 10 years in the future, and you'll be like, oh my God, I can't even believe we were even saying that. So that's just, thanks.
Can I just add on to that as well? I think that the concentrates, whether it's live resin, they're very pure. And the volume and the intake is probably lower. There will be applications. It's about finding a way to do that safely and obviously to register those processes. But let's not forget that it's less unadulterated. And therefore, the entourage effect, which we all know will play a really big part. Less terpenes are lost, less active ingredients. So I think we're mad to think it's not going to happen. It's just a matter of when and how.
I just wanted to add regarding the also product and back to the regulatory strategy. We are facing in Europe still the problem that we have only 2 countries currently in Europe allowing finished product registration. So we have Portugal and we have France, but France is still not under this pilot trial. So we cannot introduce the new product now. But this is also like a kind of problem for the companies, pharmaceutical companies, to bring distillate to purified extract to the market. Because when you have the most regulation under magister formulation, you are bringing to the pharmacist kind of pharmaceutical raw material, and the pharmacist must formulate, continue formulating under magister formulation in the pharmacy. We know that in Poland, I told you that there is only few flowers and 1 or 2 extracts registered. But the pharmacies, Polish pharmacies are very innovative. So how they are doing, because for information, you can have per prescription in Poland a purified extra 85% THC with the prescription legally. So how it's going on? It's pharmacies has really in his pharmacy the extraction equipment. So he's doing this ancient way extraction. So he has a crude extract, then he's standardizing it and then purifying to obtain this highly purified 85% extract for the vaporization. So yes, it's possible. It's only 1 product currently in Poland. And obviously from like even price perspective, Poland has no reimbursement, so everything is from the pocket of the patient. But they can access these vapes, if we can know, from legal sources, and especially with the high quality and purity. But regarding also about the purified extract, every patient is aware about entourage effect. So it's not only searching for THC, CBD. The patient we know are searching for specific terpenes. So there's also the way to enrich these purified extracts. I think it's our role now as a pharmaceutical companies to bring to the market maybe complementary, I don't want to say food supplement, but why not the blend of the terpenes to complete, like to give away a package or kit for the patient, which medical doctor can supervise and advise, for example, because we have this large knowledge about terpenes or even other synergistic herbals. So this is something which we must, as pharmaceutical companies, to introduce because we are limited by this regulatory path of magister formulation. And of course, hope that most of the countries will allow to have finished product.
And along with that will come education, because it's so key to educate our stakeholders, including our doctors, how to prescribe such different products and unique delivery systems.
Yes, and you mentioned earlier, obviously, the fact that in Australia, general practitioners can prescribe, which obviously we don't have yet in the UK. Would you say there were any other factors that have contributed to this growth that we've seen in the Australian medical market in particular?
Yeah, there are a couple of things. The first one is actually doctor education. I think that is huge now. It's up to us as producers and everybody in this room to have a part in the education process, because that's how an industry evolves. It obviously starts from patient demand, but then we need to educate doctors. It's the 80-20 rule, so you'll have a handful of doctors who are your main prescribers, but that's definitely growing. We've got over 5,000 prescribers now in Australia. And the other reason, and it's there, we haven't really talked about it, and that is in most markets, it's the quasi-medical, where the recreational and those using it for self-medicating purposes access it legally through the, the regime or the legal process, because why not? You would argue that the quality is safer just in terms of extraction techniques and what have you. You get the consistent same supply all the time. And most importantly, it's legal.
I will also add something regarding the education of the doctors, and thank you, Flita, to touching these sensitive points. It's not after education, but of course, because they are used to have the clinical data or some support, and we know all that this plant we are discovering every day some publication, and there is a lot of clinical trials, observational studies, but after the trainings, we know it from France, for example, the doctors must to practice and then have this relationship with the patient very close to take the feedbacks from there, because it's constant interaction. I will add also in this relationship the pharmacist. So back to France, we know that the first year the doctors were prescribing high CBD product to treat the pain, and after a few months, patients were just not happy and they stopped this. They asked to be withdrawn from the project because they didn't receive any relief. So only after 1 year, the French doctors, they just learned that maybe they should start titration with the balanced product, and then to obviously start slow and low, but that increase this content of THC. I think there's the huge stigma about THC. Everyone is very afraid of THC, and the doctors needs to practice and have interaction, because it's really like personalized medicine. So close interaction with the patient, and in the other countries like magister formulation, in this duo we have to add the pharmacist, because it's really like pharmacist who is doing this magister formulation, but he may do it only if he has a prescription. So if, for example, we would like to introduce some very innovative formats, I don't know, some topicals or even, I don't know, liposomal solutions, we have to first of all educate the doctors that, yes, we will introduce it through the pharmacist. So we are initiating like the prescription, then the pharmacist is formulating in the pharmacy. So.
And you actually said something really important, the follow-up. We did tons of doctor education. If they don't practice, it doesn't do anything. So what we would say to them is, why don't you find a few patients that nothing else is working for? Try those patients and then follow up with them. And what the doctors found, because I would go to a lot of medical conferences every year and I would see the same doctors, and at first they were very skeptical. Then they were like, I tried it with a few patients and it's kind of working. And one of the funny things they would say to me is, either this cannabis stuff is working or all the patients are coming together and agreeing on what they're saying to me, because they're all saying the same thing, and either it's working or they're just all working together to like trick me. So after a while they realized it is legitimate and it is helping, but it's all in the follow-up. And pharmacists, which only now in Canada are getting involved, is the secret to it, because they're the ones that are more following up. They're the ones monitoring the other medication. The doctors can't be expected to do all that, and I think that's a big help.
Yeah, I think like the pharmacists are actually like an interesting point, because if you think about it, in Germany, we have had the prescription of dronabinol, which is pure THC for ages. Like the pharmacists, I have the impression that they feel comfortable working with it. The doctors feel more comfortable prescribing it. There's more like this barrier in the mind for the flower products and for the extracts. But I think also that we owe a lot of the progress that we have in Germany to some very motivated pharmacists who want to become experts, who are working together with doctors to get these prescriptions, or who are there to maybe do test filling of cartridges. Like if you look at in Germany for the extract products, there's only one extract available for inhalation. All the other extracts are basically oral solutions, and but there are also pharmacists who are processing flower into extracts, for example. So there are possibilities through the magistral preparation, and I think it's quite interesting to get the pharmacists also involved as well as the doctor, because you need both.
Right. Are there any pharmacists in the room here? Is there any pharmacists here checking out? Only a couple in the back. All right, awesome. Go talk to them. They're smart. Sorry.
Fantastic. And I'm keen to hear from all of you, actually. How do different countries' approaches to which conditions are eligible for medical cannabis? How does that impact access?
Yeah, I think most countries are probably relatively conservative when they begin and do restrict to a number of conditions. Epilepsy, pain, it tends to be in there, so cancer or going through chemo treatment, and MS. And I just feel, rightly or wrongly, that it's based on what the perceived evidence is. And I feel that there is so much more data out there now that we need to just open our eyes, because it is there. We're getting a huge amount of data being gathered from real-world evidence. But we do know that governments need to be conservative, particularly to begin with. And so if they restrict to a certain number of conditions, but we have seen that that quickly evolves. And take Australia, for example, they have now prescribed for over 200 different medical conditions. It started off with just 5. So that was, within 4 years, it got to over 200 conditions. So it's got to start somewhere.
Yes, and I think that in Europe we have 2 types of countries. Like first, those who are preparing the regulation by reviewing all existing data, so from last year, so clinical and scientific data, and then they decided with the pluridisciplinary committee of scientists to set few indications. Like France, for example, they set these 5 indications for this pilot project. We know in Portugal there is 7 indications, and we have this simplified marketing authorization submission, but it's also only for these specific 7 indications. And then in parallel, we have these countries like Germany and Poland with no limit of indication, only the knowledge or conviction of a doctor. Again, I'm back to example from Poland, because I was practicing this country for 4 years. But I remember I met a very, very young, motivated medical doctor. His specialization, I think, was general medicine, and he was doing the PhD in medical cannabis. And he started just discovering, prescribing the cannabis. And he told me that he had a group of 6 or 7 women with very severe pain what is the pain of the
Menstrual pain, period pains?
in the head? Migraines, I'm sorry. Yes, very severe migraines. And one of the patients was it was so difficult for her to manage this pain that she planned twice to commit suicide. So she was really desperate, and she started to have this prescription of this purified extract for vaping, so 85% THC, and she said obviously that it changed her life, but on the scale of pain on 10, it still was like 2, but she could function. So then he was motivated, and he said, okay, I saw it's working. So I started to have a group of these women between 40, 50 having these severe migraines. And he was convinced, because he was just close to this patient, and he even said, like, okay, I would like to start observation study in my hospital to maybe produce some scientific data. So observation studies, by the way, it's a very good tool to have to generate this real life data from patients under controlled condition, and maybe not going directly to the full clinical studies, which is obviously time consuming and money consuming. But again, it's enough to have 1 or 2 or few doctors which are specialized in specific domain, and they are very motivated, close to the patient, with a lot of empathy. And then I think we can generate a lot of information from patients.
Fantastic. And you've both mentioned the French trial quite a few times. Do you think any of the data collection from the French trials will be useful for other markets?
Oh, of course. I mean, I love that the French government are collecting this data, and we really hope that they do something with that. You would expect a report to be published on the efficacy, or particularly the safety, in that particular trial. So we hope that they will. But if they don't, then I know we as a company supplying into that trial collect our own pharmacovigilance data, and that's going to be really important as we continue to build on that data gathering. So yeah, let's hope that France come out, because I think that could be a turning point for other countries as well.
Yes, I will add also that here a French pilot project, it's not a clinical trial, okay? It's really the purpose was to have, to check kind of supply chain, how it can be controlled from manufacturer through the distributor to the patient. So it's a trial, a lot of learnings. I think first a report was published already after 2 years. And as Flita, you said, something new which is not existing in any other European country is pharmacovigilance. So it's also like a kind of hybrid through the Eudralex website, etc. But every month, every company participating in this trial are receiving the report of the complaints of the patients. Sometimes these are very light cases, sometimes it's severe cases. But we have statistics, and we can see it. And by the end, they would generate kind of a report. For information, lack of efficacy is also a side effect, we can say. And this is what I was mentioning about doctors who started to treat the pain with the high CBD product the first year. So we lost a lot of patients because of this lack of knowledge, or maybe Yes, lack of experience. But then we practice, we could improve this data in France. I'm sure, and this is why it was also this extension of 1 year for this pilot project. Big deception for the patient, obviously. But I think that it will allow health authorities, but also all the institutions who are implementing regulation to use this data, to maybe not only use, but digest and take some learnings to implement the solid, real, not only because this is what I was mentioning about over-regulation, like realistic regulation to help patient have a high-quality product, but in the easy way, not too complicated way.
Fantastic. I think it's been so great to hear, and I'm sure everyone in the audience agrees, the detail from the different markets and how much we actually do have to learn from what's happening. We're not doing all this in a kind of microcosm, country by country, and there's so much globally to learn. As a result of that, I'd love to kind of open up to the audience and see if there are any burning questions, key thoughts anyone wants to raise, as we've got such an international panel of amazing women, and Alex as well here with us today.
And Alex as well. Let's hear it for all these amazing women, and Alex as well. This man right here has a question right there.
Thank you.
Him first. There you go.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. So coming back to education, because I know in Denmark, well, Flita, you were saying in Australia, part of the success has been the fact that doctors have been educated, maybe patients have been educated. And I think in Europe, that's still a huge problem because a lot of patients don't actually know that they have access to cannabis. A lot of doctors, they're a bit scared of prescribing it. Most Europeans in theory have access to cannabis, but, they don't in reality. I know in Denmark, the Danish government are also trying to, implement events and conferences to kind of bring, people like yourselves, doctors and patients together to sort of implement it. But what can the rest of Europe do? Because Alex, you said you had to almost take control yourself and create these cannabis clinics. I mean, how do you move that conversation forward and try and get medical cannabis out to the masses?
One thing that I think is really important, and I didn't want to touch on earlier because I wanted to get to questions, but I mean, since you brought it up, I think something that was really important is for people to be honest with their doctors. What we had in Canada, just like everywhere else, there was such a stigma where people who were using cannabis were not telling their doctors they use cannabis because they were worried what they were going to think. And then when we started teaching the doctors, we said, talk to your patients about it, be honest. And they were blown away that the patients, once they felt more comfortable talking to their doctor, that their doctor knew something about this, then they were opening up. And the doctors would say, holy cow, I didn't realize how many of my patients are using cannabis. Once I was started to be like, hey, it's okay. I'm not asking you because I want to kick you out of my clinic. I'm asking you because I'm interested. And all of a sudden, that all changed and people were being honest with them. And then they were like, oh, wait a minute, more of my patients are using cannabis. Maybe I'll talk to them about it, because the reality is cannabis is so readily available pretty much everywhere in the world. Like everywhere we go, people use cannabis. It's easy to get. So I think once doctors realize that the patients are going to use cannabis whether they like it or not, and now they should have a harm reduction approach, and maybe we should talk to them about maybe not smoking it or using CBD or not such high THC, then we can have real conversations. And I think that is a big game changer that I would like to share with people is be honest with your doctor. And if the doctor is hating on cannabis, maybe you should find a different doctor. There are open-minded doctors out there. So,
it is such a patient-driven industry, and our doctors do learn from patients. And if they don't accept it and are open and willing to learn about prescribing cannabis medicines, they potentially lose patients. And the patients move on. And that's where you start to get these clinics and other specialised doctors or authorised prescribers in the space, because they are willing and open. And there are channels, whereby patients can access and know who to access, just in terms of who prescribes more often than not. So, patients have got a huge voice, but it doesn't take away from the fact cannabis producers, just like pharmaceutical companies, have got a role to play. And we need people on the ground educating, and we need to be continuing our webinars, whether that's sending out faxes to doctor clinics, because believe it or not, that's still happening, and as well as other strategies to bring doctors together to educate.
Great, thank you. I think we have
one question up here.
one question, very quickly, please, because we're running out of time.
You've all talked a lot about concentrates, but you haven't really mentioned anything about pills or about ingestibles, edibles, that kind of thing. Is there any market for that in Europe today? And if not yet in THC, what about CBD?
So yes, all the galenic formats are possible, but obviously we have to submit full marketing authorization to the country which is ready to obtain such a submission. So currently it's Portugal, very ready from few years, I think 3-4 years, a very explicit and detailed regulation. But currently nobody achieved to have marketing authorization. We have only one approved flower in Portugal. Still I think there is the path, and this is confirmed from magister formulation. So this is why the proactive, innovative pharmacies, which I see they are sitting there, for example, having the big magister formulation labs in their pharmacy, if they have a knowledge of formulation, if they have a prescription for the doctor, for example, for the tablets with CBD or THC, they are able to do. But there is also the financial aspect and the reimbursement, like for example in Germany, because I don't think that the pharmacists will spend their time in doing these tablets or any other edibles in the pharmacy, in the magister formulation, only to help the patient. So I think this is more complex project, the problem not only from formulation, from feasibility, because this is possible. If the doctor is prescribing the tablet, for example, 50 milligrams CBD, 50 milligrams THC, it can be manufactured by pharmacies in the pharmacy in Germany, also in Poland. Yeah, but I think there is the problem of the time on the reimbursement, also of the pricing of these products.
Yeah, there are some available. There are soft gel caps in the market, and I think again it's a patient-driven thing. Perhaps it's what's the content and what is inside the capsule. That's probably the issue at the moment, and not getting the results. But the patients just don't seem to be demanding that right now. But I think as the medicinal regime progresses and more doctors start prescribing, they will want these options. But they do need to go through registration processes as well. And
earlier in the beginning of the talk, we touched on it. We didn't touch on it too much because there's not really any regulations for it. But truthfully, these products are amazing. We see a lot of edibles, beverages, extracts being used by medicine, reduces stigma, doesn't have the smell. One thing I want to point out about this is that you're only letting the illicit market win by not having these products. What we had in Canada is every product that wasn't legalized was what the illicit market was celebrating. And now the only negative we kind of are left with is that 10 milligram maximum per package, which is extremely wasteful and stupid. So now the illicit market is pretty much holding on to 100 milligram, 1,000 milligram edibles. Outside of that, there's almost no reason to go to the illicit market anymore. And I predicted 2 years ago, by 2025, we aren't even gonna have an illicit market. So, this is what the future holds for everyone else, which seems like a lifetime away for everyone. I get it, but it's gonna happen.
Hate to cut you off there, but we are actually out of time. One more time for this fantastic panel.